So thank you for coming. My name is Matt Thomas, and we're here today to talk about Ajax and Joomla. Real quick, just to introduce myself, I'm a member of the production leadership team. I'm also known in and around the Joomla world as Between Brain. I mention that mostly because if you have questions after today, you can track me down on most social media at Between Brain, mostly Twitter. But you also can find me online through my website at betweenbrain.com. You can email me, matt@betweenbrain. And this talk is also online, written in HTML, woohoo, at betweenbrain.com/talks/hello Ajax world. Now, I should start out by saying Ajax and Joomla really isn't a new thing. What's new about Joomla that we're here to talk about today is this thing called the Joomla Ajax interface. And what that is as of version 3.2 of Joomla, it's a core component. And there's also a standalone version for Joomla 1.5 and 2.5. I should also mention, before we get too far into things, that there's actually an organization on GitHub. It's the Joomla-Ajax-interface organization, where you can download the 1.5, 2.5 version, as well as sample modules and a plugin. Now, basically, the Joomla Ajax interface, also known as COM Ajax, is a component that I created less than a year ago, actually. And it was inspired while working on projects for the Guggenheim Museum. I've worked for the Guggenheim as a contractor on a project basis for just under 2 years. And in the course of that time, we're working on a number of projects that we were working on optimizing page loads and maybe enhancing some functionality. But we ran into some limitations with Joomla. So this inspired the idea of creating something like COM Ajax, something that is basically an interface that can be extended. We'll talk more about what that means in a few minutes. And really, the nutshell of what COM Ajax is it really resolves a limitation in Joomla of being able to make requests to modules and plugins. Now, you could do things like that in the past. It's just there have been different techniques for doing it. And part of the goal was to create a single solution that could be reusable. So that's kind of what I set out to do. One thing that's really cool, a story I like to tell, is about how the role community played with COM Ajax. I shared this idea one evening on Twitter, and it instantly received some really great, encouraging feedback. Like, hey, that's a cool idea, or I thought about this too, and this is how I approached it. So it was definitely fostered by community. So a lot of people provided great feedback when I shared this idea. That inspired me to create a prototype. I remember it took me 45 minutes while my wife was creating dinner. And I put it out there, I shared it, and Nicholas from Akiba was kind enough to look at it, and he provided some very helpful feedback. The original version was a little bit too flexible. In other words, it was a major security issue. You could theoretically profile basically an entire Joomla website through the original version of COM Ajax. So that feedback and the feedback from other people, once I shared that initial prototype, really led to the evolution of what it is today and how it became something into core. So Ajax in 30 seconds or less. First of all, show of hands. Has everyone here worked with Ajax? So basically everyone. So I don't really need to spend 30 seconds talking about Ajax. The key thing to mention here is the fact that Ajax uses JavaScript on the client side, and it needs to be able to make HTTP requests. Now, I'm just curious, how many people actually read the full description of this talk? Awesome. So nobody. So in the full description of the talk, I actually go into some detail about what we're focusing on. We're actually focusing on standalone modules and plugins. So we're not talking about components. And that's relevant because you've always been able to have some sort of Ajax functionality with a component. But if you have a standalone module, that is a module that does not have any corresponding component, for example, a module that may be working with external APIs, having some sort of Ajax functionality, making an HTTP request to itself was virtually impossible in Joomla. There are ways around it. A lot of times people created a standalone component or maybe a plugin. But now we can do it just within the module because we have COM Ajax and core. So that's basically the obstacle. In Joomla, a request must always be made to a component, can never be made to a module or plugin. Think about menu items. You can't create a menu item to a module. That's by design, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way Joomla works. So the challenge was to create that standalone application, basically, that you could create a module for, or even plugin. We built in support for plugins as well. And Ajax would provide that functionality to make those HTTP requests. So that's the solution. Here's a sample of JavaScript written in jQuery. I probably shouldn't have written in jQuery, but I think a lot of people understand jQuery very well. It's very readable. And you'll see right here that we're making the request to option equals Ajax, plugin equals Hello Kitty, format equals JSON. And that's the JavaScript part of it. You'll see here that we're actually making the request to Ajax. That's the component. That's the interface, essentially. And we're telling it that the plugin that we want to work with is the Hello Kitty plugin, and the format equals JSON. I mentioned, you saw my picture of my daughter, so hence Hello Kitty. Trying to sneak some of that in there. So a lot of this is thanks to Nicholas at Akiba. We had to impose some conventions. And it's not just because of security issues, but by having conventions in place, by having naming conventions, that makes it easier for developers to use Ajax, and it makes it easier to actually retrofit existing modules and plugins to use it. So we have a few required URL parameters. And everything that we're talking about right now are URL parameters for that HTTP request. So obviously, the option always has to be Ajax. That's the entry point. We have to tell it whether or not it's a module or plugin. So we'll just say module equals whatever the name of the module is, or plugin equals the name of the plugin. And as of right now, we are requiring a format. So basically, any format that Joomla supports, such as JSON or raw. Ajax also has a built-in custom format of debug. It's basically a developer-friendly, human-readable format. So if you're returning a response, it'll be broken up. And I'll show you an example here in a few minutes. So you can look at your response in your browser if you'd like to. If you're working with modules, so this is when option equals Ajax, module equals whatever. When you say module equals whatever, let's say module equals session, so a module named mod session. That implies a few things to you as a developer. First of all, Ajax will actually look for a helper.php file. In modules, mod, the name of the value of the module parameter. So if module equals session, Joomla will look in, Ajax will look within your Joomla installation at modules mod session helper.php. So you must have a helper.php file. That's required because that seems to be fairly common convention for most modules. And your class name for within your helper file is mod, first letter uppercase. So in this case, mod uppercase session helper. Once again, fairly common convention for Joomla modules. OK, so by default, Ajax will fire the getAjax method. So if you don't designate method equals whatever, it will fire getAjax. So there's that default value. But if you want to do get, set, do something really cool with Ajax, you could just say method equals do something really cool with, and Ajax will look for the value of method plus Ajax. I'll show you some examples here in a few minutes. So right now it might be a little nebulous, but we'll see some actual concrete examples here in a few minutes. So this is an example module. You'll see right here, this is fairly common Joomla file structure. And really the point is we have to have the helper.php file in that right location. You'll see module equals session. So we have a class of mod session helper. And we're defaulting to the getAjax. I'm just returning just a string for right now. So plugins. This is something a little unusual. But when creating Ajax, I figured, well, why not support plugins? And at first, I really had absolutely no use case for it. But now I have a few. And if we have time, we'll show you those. I think they're kind of neat, to be honest with you. So this is when you say option equals com Ajax, plugin equals, let's say, latest articles. So that means I have a plugin, a plug underscore latest articles. And what that does is, because plugins are event-driven, com Ajax will actually fire that event. So it'll be on Ajax the value of the plugin parameter. So if my plugin parameter equals latest articles, com Ajax will fire on Ajax latest articles. So this is the structure. There isn't much here that you have to follow as far as convention, other than the class name. It's just like a Joomla plugin. Plug Ajax, because it's part of that group. Latest articles. Has everyone here created a plugin before? Are you familiar with this naming convention? Raise your hands. So almost everyone. OK, so you're familiar with this. We have an Ajax group, so that's why Ajax is here. It's a plugin. It's Ajax. That's the value of the plugin parameter. So additional data. Basically anything you want. So if your Ajax module or plugin is looking for additional information, a lot of cases you will be. You just pass that in your URL. So for example, command equals add. Oh, sorry about that. Data equals foo. Debug equals true. Whatever you want. That gets submitted with your request. And so now we'll go look at some code. This is we'll look real quick at a very basic example. This is on GitHub at the Joomla Ajax interface organization, and it's the Hello Ajax World module. So we'll hop over there real quick. While I bring this up, at this point, does anyone have any questions? No? Either very confusing or very easy. That's the goal. The goal is to make it really simple, really easy to use. And I'm very happy to say that I wrote documentation before we actually submitted the code to Joomla. So, so this is my Hello Ajax World module. Right now, because we're dealing with Ajax, we're using some JavaScript. This is my view file. It's basically an input with a submit button. Oh, that does not work very well with PHP Storm. Yeah. So we have an input and a submit button. Can everyone see this OK? Yes. OK, I'll pull up the view mode in a minute here. And we just have an empty div for our JavaScript to work with. I'm sorry? It doesn't. No, it isn't actually. That's specific to the JavaScript I've written. So I can show you that right now. This is the JavaScript that this module uses. Now, this is in. This is not the way I would do it in production, but I've written it out longhand, and I'm just injecting it into the head just for example purposes. And I'm using jQuery once again because it's very readable. So basically, I'm saying here that when you click the input type equals submit, we're going to get a value. And that's the value of the input with the name of data. Oh, thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. Once again, the request will be made to option equals com Ajax. Module equals hello Ajax world. The data is a custom parameter that I've added in my module. It's going to be equal to the value, which is the value from the input with the name equals data. And the format is raw. And all I'm doing here is I'm updating that status div that you asked about. That's it. That's the JavaScript. That's the request. Very simple. It doesn't. That's the problem with. Why are we? There we go. And so this is the last piece of the puzzle, the helper file. So the module is hello Ajax world. So the class is mod hello Ajax world helper. And I'm using the default method of get Ajax. And all I'm doing, I'm getting the value of the data parameter in the URL, and I'm returning a string plus that value. Pretty simple, correct? Really easy. So to show you a little more advanced example, we also have this session module. So I'll show you in action here. I'm using a PHP session to store values that I'm submitting. So I'll do a hello Ajax world. So I submitted those values each time to the module itself through com-ajax. And that module is creating a PHP session and storing these values. Now, right now, it's not very impressive. But if I go to a different page and I add another value, you'll see I have my previous values here. So it can store that data in a PHP session. Once again, just an abstract example. So here's my mod session. And it's a little more involved here because we have PHP sessions and we have different functions. So we have I have a command parameter. And this command parameter has different options of add, delete, destroy. So we can add, delete, destroy values to the PHP session that the module is handling. So you can see I'm just manipulating the session here. Straightforward or confusing? Straightforward. Okay. Any questions right now about modules? Is this just?
We have that default get Ajax task. What if we want to use different tasks? How do we do that?
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So the question is, what if we don't want to use get Ajax? Oh, that's the method parameter. So there's a method parameter. You could say method equals set Ajax, for example. So you could have getters and setters. And so that would be part of your HTTP request. So option equals com Ajax, module equals session, method equals set. And then that tells com Ajax, instead of calling get Ajax, call set Ajax. So that's an optional parameter, but that allows you to have different functions. You're welcome. Any other questions at this point? Okay. So is anyone interested in looking at what we can do with plugins? So plugins are kind of an added bonus when it comes to com Ajax. Obviously, you don't have a front end to plugins. And in retrospect, the name com Ajax may not have been the best name because we're not talking about Ajax anymore when it comes to plugins. We're talking more like API functionality. And so that's one of the use cases I came up with using com Ajax. You can fire plugins to create API-like functionality. So on the Joomla Ajax interface organization, I have this plugin called Latest Articles. And actually, I'll show you the code real quick. I'm very proud of the fact that it's tiny. This is the entire plugin. Can everyone see that okay? Okay. And let me do this. I'll wrap myself in it. So essentially, the bulk of the code In this plugin, it's a database query. That's all I'm doing. I'm just querying the database, give me the last 5 articles, and return them. That's all it does. So it's really simple. And as a result, I'll get a response like this. So I'm just making an HTTP request to Ajax plugin equals latest articles and format equals debug. I could ask for a different format, for example, if I wanted to, JSON. If I called JSON, it'd actually try to download the file because of headers and things like that. But this is the custom debug format. And you can see here we have our latest articles. So this creates a very easy way to implement API-like functionality in Joomla today. Now, of course, you can get more advanced. You can start submitting tokens with your header requests, and your plugins can look for that. But the example here is a very simple API-like functionality, which took maybe 5 minutes to write. So if you want to get your data exposed and provided to other consumers, you could do that today with Ajax with just some simple plugins. Yes?
Is it possible to extend the formats? For example, you're talking about customers. I'm thinking about like Google Shopping. You can export an XML file.
OK.
But then the export format would be XML. Now you haven't seen XML combined.
That's a good question. So the question is, can you provide a custom format? And at this point in time, no. And so to give you a better example, originally the original version of Ajax did not require a format. So you could designate any format you wanted to. So you could use a format that Joomla already provides or a custom format. There was quite a bit of discussion at the time to enforce one, and it was decided to enforce a format. And ironically, there's a discussion right now to reverse that. So obviously, there's differences of opinion on that. One idea that I had to kind of find a common ground is to provide an optional parameter to override the format, or maybe if you designated a format that didn't exist, Ajax could look in the plugin or the module for that format. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, right now it doesn't provide it easily out of the box, but it's something that a lot of people are discussing, and we'd love to get your input as well.
Because I'm thinking you have the raw output, right?
Yes.
So I could build the XML in my plugin module and then I would use the raw.
Yes, exactly.
Actually, if you use a format like
Oh.
I think it falls back to raw.
That's my fault. That's my fault. That's in the plugin. So yeah, that's a fault of the plugin. But yeah, you could do something like that. But yeah, it would be nice to be able to provide that option, that ability. So any other questions at this point in time? So another interesting use case. I've been playing with creating just kind of a solution in Joomla I'm calling Injector. And really, for all intents and purposes, it's a lot like no numbers, articles anywhere, modules anywhere, all wrapped up into one. Plus, it does some other things. For example, what it provides out of the box that I needed control over was formatting and having sub-templates. So I can have like different styles, for example. And so the idea is you can click a button to inject an item. You get a modal, you select your content item, and it creates the short code. And then when you look at the front end of the site, oh, I'm sorry, I'm right here. I actually need to enable that plugin. So you can see here right now I have my short codes. I just enabled the plugin. So now I've actually injected those articles. My goal was to provide templating. So you have access to the entire content object. So I have access to metadata, all the little bits and pieces I might need. And then I can create templates and subtemplates and all kinds of fun stuff. But the relevant point here is if you look at these editor buttons, they're basically making calls.
Don't see the editor button.
Oh, you don't see the editor button. All right. Okay.
So you make the screen a little small.
I will do this. There we go. So for example, the Joomla article button, still can't see that. You can see that it's, okay, we'll do this a different way. You can see that we're calling com content and a view and a layout, all those different things. But I'm lazy. I don't want to create a component and all this other stuff just so I could have a modal window with some content, with some information in it. So what I ended up doing is using an Ajax plugin. And the Ajax plugin creates this view. I'm calling com Ajax, and I'm firing this plugin injector, and I'm using the HTML format. So I created a view in the back end just with a plugin. And so you can utilize com Ajax for extending components with views. So when I click that button, I have this view which is normally created with a component. But in this case, I'm just using a plugin. So by supporting plugins with com Ajax, it provides some, in my opinion, some interesting opportunities to kind of push Joomla towards APIs, push Joomla in different directions that you couldn't do before. Or for example, one reason why I like this approach, sure, you could create a system plugin that always fires in every request that might look for a custom parameter before it returns a response. But in this case, this plugin only fires when I'm calling it in this one instance. So theoretically, it's more performant. Theoretically, you have less chances of having some sort of conflict. So I think it's a little more insular. It's a little more secure, safe that way. But the bottom line is it provides some interesting opportunities, I think. So, and hopefully, and this will sound funny as being the creator of com Ajax, hopefully we can get rid of it here pretty soon and have full API, hypermedia APIs or web services in Joomla core so we can do more fun, interesting things like this. So any other questions at this point in time? None? Oh, yes?
I used your plugin
Okay.
to let different Joomla sites communicate each other, exchange data.
Beautiful.
My question is, how in your opinion, secure this kind of communication? How you can increase much more the security of this kind of communication? Create something, or I don't know, using the HTTPS.
Well, I think we were just talking about this in, was it Pierre's talk earlier today about passing tokens? One idea is you could put a token in the URL, but even better would be to put it in the header. So you could add headers when you're making the request of some sort of token, and then your plugin could theoretically check that header. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but you could actually authenticate in the database and actually work in some authentication within the plugin.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically. So you would want to put that in the request headers, and you could authenticate users that way, for example, or consumers of the data. Okay, great.
Just suggest I think you need to add Matthias Aguirre. He has an example of creating tokens with lifetime and connecting to some.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. That would be great to get into the examples, too.
Yes,
Probably simple, right? Okay.
You know
Yeah.
how to do it?
Oh, sorry?
I said if you know how to do it.
Yes. Well, if we could get an example documented, then it makes it easier for everyone. So, yes.
So how can we get that back into the controllers and get rid of com Ajax? What's your plan?
I don't have one. But you know, I was at the talk earlier today about the APIs, and so that's been a recurring theme this weekend. is hypermedia APIs, web services. A lot of people are talking about it. And it seems like the router, that's the issue. So at the API talk earlier this morning, he's using the Slim framework for routing. So he wasn't even using Joomla's router. And so basically, it's almost like a different application just sitting within your Joomla website. That is one option, and that could be a short-term solution. But I think long-term, we really want to focus on web services or hypermedia APIs in Joomla. There is a work group, and there has been some work done. We just need more people contributing, more people helping. And yes, I think that could help a lot too. I think from everyone I've talked to who knows a lot about this, it seems like the router, that's like the Achilles heel of the situation. That's what needs to be fixed. But yeah, once that's fixed, it seems like we're right there.
Would it make sense to direct a bit, let's say, work of George as whole summer code project? If we're doing the controllers and the work of Hannes, we see new router to take that in account. It's the right time now.
Yeah, it may be. We can.
I don't think Hans' work will change the round that much. He will improve it, but I don't think he can fundamentally change it.
Because we need to fundamentally change.
You can't do that within Joomla 3.
Exactly.
How it's set up, it's so much tied to always go to a component. I don't think you can change that.
But if it goes to the component, then the controller on the other side knows how to handle that Ajax and knows how to reply JSON or whatever instead of HTML, then the job is done.
It's
Already do that. Within a component, you can do that. No problem.
Yeah, but if we standardize that at the controller level, then we have solved the good part of that problem.
It's possible. Yeah, I think really it's just a matter of somebody doing it.
Or did I miss something?
No.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
No, not at all. I think you're right, and that's kind of like what this COM API is one component that kind of provides that. But I think that's one reason why Pierre is using a separate routing within his API, because we can't change it fundamentally enough without breaking Joomla 3's routing. So I'm sure there would be enough agreement in this room that we don't want to break the routing in Joomla 3. So maybe that's an intermediary measure. Maybe between now and Joomla 4, we have a separate router package just in the API directory. Just thinking out loud. Yes?
Curiously, because you are essentially passing straight through execution from COM Ajax to existing plugins and potentially other third-party plugins, is there a whitelist blacklisting system to prevent you gratuitously calling or cross-siting into particular key plugins that might, for instance, reset passwords or I don't know the exact API for those particular pieces. I don't know if they're all private, but just the thought that if I could wing it on a local host of using.
Absolutely. So basically, I think it sounds like you're asking about security concerns.
Essentially, but with an internal security concern set for instead of like an external one, as it were, with cross-site. If you know what I mean, it's actually within the PHP framework rather than.
Absolutely. So basically, these naming conventions that we implemented for modules, designating the module in a plugin, but more importantly, enforcing the class naming and the methods and the plugin events. That convention isn't used anywhere else within Joomla, within the core. So basically, you have to consciously develop a plugin or module to work with COM Ajax. And that's the thing that Nicholas discovered. See, my idea was, wouldn't it be really cool if we could get an Ajax response from anything at any time? And yeah, it's really cool, but it's also really insecure. So, thank you, Nicholas, again. you know, if we lived in a completely honest world, that would be awesome, but we don't, so we can't do that. But yes. Any other questions? No? Well, along those lines, thank you very much. You can find this. Yeah.